Gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. So excited to have you on here to talk about one of my favorite topics, all about Akkermansia mucinophilia. Say that 5 times fast, just give it a try. So we're gonna talk all about this today, and I have an amazing guest star, Dr. John Eade, right here. Say hello.
Hello, thank you for having me on. Very excited to be a part of this. I always love talking about Acromancia, certainly.
Perfect. Well, we are happy to have you here, a true expert in the space. And I see that a few people have already found this out. So if you look at the bottom of your screen or your tablet or your phone, whatever you're looking on, you'll notice a little bar that has some information, and there's a Q&A section. So throughout this, feel free to add your questions to the Q&A section. It might take a little bit depending on what sort of device you're on to find this, but we want to be able to answer almost all the questions we can at the end. We're going to talk a little bit about Acromancia, and then we're going to go into the question section. But as questions come up or at the end, we really want to encourage you to put them in there. So thank you, Pamela, for already putting in a little note. That's wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And like I mentioned, we're going to talk about Pendulum's Acromancia. My name is Kristen Newsel. I'm the Director of Nutrition Programs and Registered Dietitian, one of the registered dietitians here at Pendulum. We're going to talk a little bit about Pac-Man, and we'll get into that. Some polyphenols, PGC versus Acromancia versus GI repair, because you know here at Pendulum we have a great assortment of products. And at the end, we're going to give a promo code. And I do like to point out, if you have to jump off for whatever reason, this is going to be recorded, and we're going to send it out 24 hours afterwards. So don't worry, we'll send it to you afterwards, the recording. Wonderful. So here at Pendulum, we are the only people who have Acromancia. This is the only place you're going to get the real deal. So keep that in mind. And this is truly the next generation of gut health. And for the first time ever, this keystone strain is available as a daily probiotic. Our patented strain of Acromancia mucinophilia optimizes the balance of your gut mucus layer. Kind of sounds gross, but it's not. We need that. And helps to maintain a healthy ecosystem of beneficial bacteria in your gut microbiome. So Acromancia mucinophilia is linked to improved gut health. A well-balanced gut microbiome supports a healthy body and healthy weight. And I want you to think of your gut lining like a pipe, and you don't want holes in your pipe, because what happens when you have holes in your pipe under your kitchen sink? You get a leaky pipe. Same with your gut. A permeable gut can allow bacteria to get into your bloodstream, which is something we don't want to happen. And having a less permeable gut is linked with better health outcomes and less inflammation. All really good things. So Acromancia in general, it's a fairly new strain. It was discovered pretty recently in 2004, and it accounts for about 1 to 4% of healthy adults' microbiome population. It lives in the mucosal layer. So if you're getting a stool test, I want to caution everybody, just take it with a grain of salt. I think that they are wonderful tests. However, because Acromancia lives in that mucosal layer, sometimes it's not picked up because it's not in that stool layer. So keep that in mind when you're getting those tests done. Low Akkermansia, people with low Akkermansia, typically it's been found in the literature that they have a higher body weight, BMI, blood cholesterol level, and fasting blood glucose levels. And this bacterium is more abundant in the gut of healthy subjects than in that of people with diabetes and obese patients, and patients with things like bowel disease and metabolic disorder. And recent intervention studies also confirmed an inverse correlation of AMUC. That's a shortened version, we like to call it here because it's a pretty long one. Abundance with body weight, inflammation, metabolic syndrome, and type 2 diabetes. So how exactly does this work? And John's going to go into this a little bit more on the next slide. But basically, Acromancia mucinophilia, this word mucinophilia translates to affinity of mucin. It likes to eat that mucin. Okay, so Akromansia breaks down mucin and turns them into short chain fatty acids. This is going to get really technical, just stay with me, including acetate. Acetate is used by other beneficial bacteria like firmicutes to make butyrate, which is a vital energy source for the cells lining your gut. This all works together. It is thought that Akromansia produces short-chain fatty acids such as acetic acid from mucin and supplies energy to goblet cells that produce mucin. Metformin, an anti-diabetic drug, is suggested to also increase the number of goblet cells, thereby enhancing mucin production, thickening that intestinal mucus layer I talked about earlier, and maintaining the intestinal barrier mechanism. And this contributes to that anti-inflammatory effect and consequently its anti-diabetic action. So I'm going to let John go into it in a little bit more detail here.
Thanks, Kristen. So as Kristen was pointing out, one of the key roles that Akromansia plays is in helping the healthy ecosystem to thrive. And one of the realizations, researchers have been looking into this as to how does this work? And one aspect of it is this what's called cross-feeding. And cross-feeding is when one strain needs essential metabolites from another strain, but the flip side is also true, that strain then provides essential metabolites to the strain, so they're linked. So it's not just that one strain is getting a benefit in a one-way street, it's a two-way road. And so Akromansia is actually, the physical position of Akromansia is very unique because it's allowed to be directly on the lining. As Kristen points out, it actually uses as an energy source mucin. So you can see them kind of depicted here as these long chain things coming off of the bottom of the screen. And so it breaks down the mucin and provides a material for other strains, especially butyrate producing strains, to munch on. So that includes acetate, as Kristen mentioned, as well as propionate and other molecules. And so now these butyrate producers use those substrates themselves, and then they produce butyrate, which is helpful for your lining, as well as producing material that the Akromansia itself uses. So then it creates this virtuous cycle where having a healthy amount of Akromansia results in a healthy amount of butyrate producing bacteria, and then those in turn result in stabilizing and helping to have a healthy amount of Akromansia. So we can go to the next slide. And this is kind of a little bit of a zoom out of that. So on the top part, you can see kind of a reproduction of the previous slide in that cross-feeding mode. And then this is just showing now the cascade of potential health effects that are resulting from that. And so researchers have been digging into, well, what is the mechanism for why there is this correlation that Kristen was mentioning? Like there tends to be a high correlation with both butyrate producer abundance and Akromansia abundance in healthy individuals versus those that have metabolic syndrome versus those that potentially have some of these inflammation issues. And the reason comes down to two kind of broad areas. One is helping your cells and your lining to be tightly located next to each other to kind of form a nice tight barrier. So it reduces gut permeability. And that's the thing that helps on the systemic inflammation side of things. And what's known technically as metabolic endotoxemia, which is that when you eat, you can get these kind of higher increased amounts of LPS and other things that get across the barrier that create inflammation in other parts of your body. The other aspect that we certainly delved into in our first formulation, PGC, is how it actually can help improve metabolism. So there are some specialized cells in your gut lining called L cells, and they produce molecules that are necessary for you to handle glucose load. So things like GLP-1, and it turns out that those cells need signaling. They're tightly in concert. Work tightly in concert with signaling from the strains, these kind of healthy strains in your gut lining. So they require that in order to help, do their function. And so it turns out that has an impact on your body's capability of handling sugar. And so the next slide, we can actually go into a little bit more detail there. This is preclinical work. So this is done in a mouse model. And this group published on this, about over a year ago, showing that Acromancia creates a protein that indirectly on its own induces these specialized L cells I was telling you about to produce GLP-1. And as I said, like GLP-1 is important and has been studied actually. Pharmaceuticals, create kind of artificial versions of this GLP-1 analogs directly to address diabetes, and these are on the market already. But GLP-1 is the natural one that's produced by your body, and it is critical for your body's response to meals. And so what's shown here, the left graph is to do with weight. The black line is low-fat diet, mice on low-fat diet. So you see they're gaining weight as they age, but only a little bit. The red line is high-fat diet, and not unexpectedly, they're gaining a lot more weight. And then the green lines are high-fat diet mice, but then given this protein that is secreted by Acromancy. So you can see that it significantly reduces the amount of weight gain. And on the right is sugar spike measurement. So now the x-axis there is time in minutes. And what that test is when you're given, a glucose load, your blood sugar, spikes up. And a measure of health is the fact that, that spike doesn't go up too high and that it dies off quickly. So the area under that curve, the smaller it is, the better it is. So the black line again is low-fat diet mice. The red line is high-fat diet mice, and the green one is the high-fat diet mice given this protein that Acromancia makes. So there's now an understanding of some of the mechanism by which Acromancia can directly affect metabolic health.
Great, thank you. Always learn something new whenever you start talking about this. So that's amazing. I also find it just so fascinating that just something so little as P9 from Acromancia can make that much of an impact on weight. So really great stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about food and nutrition, which I love to talk about. So when we talk about prebiotics and probiotics and polyphenols and what all of these things do, my husband actually didn't even know the difference between pre and probiotics. So we won't give him flack. That's okay. I helped him sort it out. So basically with prebiotics, it's good to get a great variety of these things. So prebiotics are going to increase the density of your microbiome. So all the strains that you have in there, it's going to help nourish and nurture those strains in there and help increase the density. And prebiotics, we're going to go over the difference between these two on the next slide. Probiotics increase diversity, so very different than the density. So by introducing new strains, by taking Pendulum glucose control or Acromancia or our GI repair product, those are going to increase the diversity of the strains that you might be missing or lacking. Polyphenols, which are things like these beautiful pomegranates, cranberries, all sorts of teas and spices, those can increase Acromancia. It's been shown in the literature to increase the abundance of Acromancia, which is really fascinating. So what all this slide says is, hey, we need a good variety of these things. We can't just eat fiber, which is wonderful. We want to do that, but that's not going to introduce new strains that we might be missing. That's where the probiotics come into play. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between pre and probiotics. So prebiotics, think of them as foods for probiotics, things like apples, garlic, almonds, Jerusalem artichokes. We have some asparagus here. So those are all foods for probiotics. And then probiotics are foods for good bacteria. So basically in yogurt, in miso, in the pickled vegetables, you're going to get different bacterial strains. Kefir is a wonderful example. I don't know too many people who love kefir as much as I do, but I think it's great for you. And the types of prebiotics. So basically these are fibers, right? And not all fibers are going to be prebiotics. So insoluble fiber, this stimulates gut peristalsis and digestion. Does it feed the gut microbiome? It does not. However, it's still great for a lot of things. Helps with colon health, helps with digestion. And some examples include things like whole wheat flour, wheat bran, nuts, beans, veggies like cauliflower, lettuce, green beans. Resistant starch and soluble fiber, these are fibers that are going to help feed that gut microbiome, which is wonderful. And resistant starch are carbohydrates that resist digestion, and they function very similarly to fiber. And some examples include oats, beans, ripe bananas, unripe bananas, so the green bananas, legumes, cooked and cooled potatoes, and cooked and cooled rice. Those are all examples of your resistant starches. Some soluble fiber, this dissolves in water and forms a gel-like material. It's going to help lower cholesterol. It's going to help slow the absorption of sugar, because what it does is it forms a gel along your intestinal wall. And that makes it much harder for, glucose to get in there and get absorbed. So it helps prevent those sugar spikes as well. Some sources include oats and barley, peas, beans, fruits and veggies. Psyllium is a wonderful source of soluble fiber. So with these, I always encourage people to try and get a really good variety. The different types of fiber are also going to help with different bowel issues. So think soluble slow. So if you're having diarrhea, soluble is going to be the one for you. Insoluble is on the opposite end of the spectrum. If you're having constipation, that's going to be a really good one for you. And most fruits and vegetables have a good variety of your insoluble and soluble. Now on to polyphenols. So what are they? Exactly. So these are a category of plant compounds that offers various health benefits that can act as antioxidants, meaning that they can neutralize harmful free radicals that would otherwise damage your cells and increase your risk of conditions like cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. So there's over 8,000 polyphenols, and that makes it really hard. And I want to remind everyone that just because something says, oh, there's a lot of polyphenols here, doesn't necessarily mean it's quality. We recommend taking the food as opposed to, trying to get it from your foods, and all of that is really good. But there's some people who do need a supplement for this. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but here's some really great examples of some top polyphenol containing foods. We have flax seeds, dark chocolate, red wine. Who doesn't love red wine? Cloves, blueberries. A lot of what I see are just the cranberries and the pomegranate. Those are two really big ones in terms of polyphenols and Acromancia. Okay, so finding the right Pendulum product for you. We get asked this question a lot. So Pendulum glucose control helps manage type 2 diabetes. It is the first and only medical probiotic designed to help manage A1C levels and post-meal sugar spikes. And then we've got Acromancia, which has been our star this presentation for overall gut health. It's an exclusive formulation. Like I said, you won't find this anywhere else that produces organic compounds to keep the gut and body in the best shape possible. And then GI repair to help relieve occasional gut discomfort. So if you're joining today and curious about which one is best for you, I recommend, taking a look at this and seeing what resonates with you mostly. So now it's time for that code, and I want you all to write this down. This is going to be a hard one to spell, so write it down, double check it. Acromancia is going to give you 15% off your your first bottle of your subscription membership. And we did just lower the prices, so don't hear that too often, but it's something that we're really proud of from our manufacturing team, who have worked really hard to help lowering that price for you all. So I guess we'll get into the Q&A, John. I think there's a lot in here. Really good questions here. So
yeah.
Let's see. Do you find any in here, John, that you want to go ahead and take?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I was in fact scrolling through. Well, okay, so maybe we could I don't know. I would just probably scroll from the top, and you answered maybe some of this too regarding whether if you have, is it possible to have 0% acromancy on these tests? And yes, it is possible. And to the point I think that Kristen was making earlier, these tests can be directional. So if you're low on these tests, this could be informative of you might need to supplement, but not necessarily the case, right? So that's part of the issue, is that right now it's not applicable 100% of the time, and so but these tests can be helpful directionally there. I don't know, Kristen, if you wanted to add anything further there.
No, I think that quite candidly, when I took my first stool test, I was 0%. So, and I remember emailing you, John, and questioning like, what's wrong with this? And this was before I knew everything that I know now. So I had 0%, but it's tough. It's tough to really truly measure without something super invasive. Right. So.
No, exactly. And I think the issue is that a lot of these studies, it's a distribution. So when people say, in general, metabolic syndrome is associated with low levels of butyrate producers and Acromancia, it's a distribution in both cases, but the distribution is shifted. So you have a higher chance if you're low on it to being in one spot versus another, but it's not 100% chance, right? All distributions, there's always some, variation, person to person variation.
Exactly.
Okay, then there's the question about when you should take it. So, whether you do it with your meal, during or after. And it's recommended to do during the meal or soon thereafter, mainly to get through the stomach acid. So the Acromancia is in an acid-resistant capsule. So that enables it to survive longer in stomach acid. But then additionally, having a meal also increases the pH there, so reduces the acidity, and so would help on that front as well. So that's why we recommend taking it with a meal.
Perfect. That's great. Let's see here. How safe is your shipping for the product? I worry about how higher and lower temps may affect it. So we have done research on this. John, do you want to go ahead and speak to this one? I feel like it's right up your alley.
Sure, yeah. So actually, Acromancia is one of our more stable strains. That being said, because it's a live strain and we have kind of just put it in stasis by making it lyophilized, you want to store it in a cool place. You don't want it to be, kind of sitting on your dashboard under the sun. But we have done studies and know that, in terms of in shipping, it should be fine, even with kind of the normal expected variation, and even in summer temperatures of shipping.
Great, thank you. And we've got a really good question here. I feel like we keep getting this question every time. Is it good for Sibo? So this is a wonderful question. And for those who don't know, Sibo is small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So we do not have any clinical research to state it's good or bad for Sibo. So unfortunately, I have to refer you to your healthcare provider to talk to them about if this is good for you or not. I can't make that medical decision. I'm so sorry. But yes, very, very good question. And then how quickly does the product work on average? So this one, everyone's microbiome is different. Really good question here too. Everyone's microbiome is different. So for me, I had 0%. So it's going to probably will take a little bit longer for the bacterial strains to take up residence in my gut. But for someone who has a pretty good amount, it might not take as long. John, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say that, a number of people report already feeling kind of the GI differences within the first couple of days. And some of it ends up being a little bit of discomfort because, your GI was in one state and then it shifts to another. But, a good chunk of people report already kind of stabilization if they had issues in terms of on the GI front, that they already feel the difference in the improvement early on. That said, other health effects can certainly take longer to observe, especially, for example, like any potential improvements on the metabolic front, depending on how you measure it. Like, for example, if you're looking at A1C, by definition, that'll take you 3 months just physiologically because of the turnover for red blood cells. So there are just going to be some levels of effects that can't really be measured, on a very short time scale, but other things, depending on if that was the what happened, in your personal case, to Kristen's point, like everybody's a little bit different, can be felt within a few days to a week.
Yes, thank you, John. Okay, so question here, should Akromansia be combined with any other particular probiotics? John, do you want to take this one?
Well, I mean, so we do believe that there's a natural synergy between Acromancia and butyrate producers. Now, unfortunately, it turns out that it's very hard to find butyrate producer on the market because both Acromancia and butyrate producers are this kind of new class of probiotic, which is these strict anaerobes, right? They live in the part of your gut where there's basically no oxygen. And so they actually get killed off by any small concentrations of it. And so you have to have a manufacturing process to be able to scale it, commercially, that is airtight, and that can get it into a state where it is oxygen tolerant, to be able to actually package it. So, in terms of other probiotic strains, I would say like that probably is, would be ideal. Certainly we've also seen benefit with combining with bifidobacterium, and that is available. So that can potentially help. And then, Kristen, has pointed out that there can be prebiotic combinations that have themselves been shown to help or correlated with higher levels of Acromancia.
Yes, great. We got a question here from Julian. What is FBG? Great question. I apologize. I put the acronym in there. So FBG stands for fasting blood glucose. So let's say overnight when you're sleeping, you're not eating and getting your blood glucose tested that morning before having any food. That's a fasting blood glucose. And that's a really good unit of measurement if you have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes. It's a really good measurement to see how your blood glucose levels have done while fasting. I am experiencing some extreme bloating and gas with Akkermansia. What can I do? Okay, so sometimes this can happen. Sometimes you can be really sensitive. Anytime someone starts a new probiotic, this can happen. So the first thing I like to recommend is making sure that you're taking it correctly. So a lot of times when people tell me this happens, they might not be taking it correctly more often than not. So I would make sure that you're taking it with food. And if you are taking it with food and you're still experiencing this after about 2 weeks, I recommend going down to 1 a day. You might just have a super sensitive tummy and that happens from time to time, but going down to 1, every other day. So seeing how you do with that and then sort of building up to that goal of 1 a day. But that would be my recommendation, just because some people can be, really sensitive to any sort of new probiotic. Okay, so a really good question here. Could you talk about the relationship between Acromancia and cancer? Basically, an integrative oncologist directed me to Pendulum to get Acromancy. I began taking it in February. My recent stool test showed active Acromancia. Can you please help me understand the relationship between cancer and Acromancia? John, you want to go for this?
Right. So this is actually a very exciting new field where there have been a number of publications recently that appear to show that there is a connection between higher Acromancia levels and responsiveness to immune checkpoint inhibitors, so a certain type of cancer treatment. That being said, I just want to make sure to state up front, we haven't done the studies ourselves to demonstrate that that's kind of directly translates clinically for taking our product. But that's kind of the new area that's exciting. This is why probably you were referred to on this front. This is certainly an area of active work and interest for us to collaborate with these ongoing studies and see to what degree these things hold up in a full clinical study.
Definitely. Thank you. Okay, so should I continue taking other probiotics? This is another really good question for your doctor, because I can't provide medical advice, unfortunately. John, do you have anything?
No, I don't think. Well, I mean, I think maybe the only thing I might say is that there have been various studies showing probiotics, kind of your standard probiotics, in general having overall health benefits, kind of in a correlative sense. I think maybe the way to think about it here is not necessarily an either or. It is that these specific strains were developed with a specific kind of scientific mechanism of action in mind. So they were developed almost in the same tradition as some of the pharmaceutical, drugs are approached, but we didn't, we're taking kind of the natural strains and we're not doing any modification to them. So our thesis is that, the microbiome is a place where there truly was sort of a original Garden of Eden. There was a healthy pre-state. And if we can figure out more precisely which are those things, and we can just restore some of those natural functions, that they would do have very specific health effects. So this is not kind of a general, helping, kind of on broad, health aspect. It's, dropping A1C or helping on that front, or things of that sort that have very specific endpoints.
Yes, great. So question here is, I have a 13-year-old girl that was in the NICU as an infant, and we suspect was given broad spectrum antibiotics. She is generally heavier than either parent, and some believe it is related. Can you comment on this? And also if you recommend other pre and postbiotic that you sell, or even other strains that you don't offer to supplement? This is such a great question. And I think so close to something similar for our CEO with her daughter. When she was born, she was on a lot of antibiotics and subsequently had a lot of food issues and things like that. And that's actually why Colleen, it inspired her to start this organization. So in terms of this, it's so hard to say. We're so early in microbiome research. There very well could be a correlation to that if it's like something very different, but your microbiome is shaped as soon as you're born. Whether you're born via cesarean section or vaginally really helps shape the bacteria that is in your gut microbiome. And, that's why typically antibiotics aren't recommended unless absolutely necessary under 2 years of age. And I do want to preface, I'm not anti-antibiotics. I think they have a place for sure. But sometimes it can cause this sort of imbalance at such a young age. So I think, talking to your doctor about what the best is for you, our strains, our product that has the most strains is the Pendulum glucose control. And we do have people who don't necessarily have diabetes, but they do take it just for the 5 different strains that are included in it. Okay, question here. Will it heal leaky gut? All right, John, I'm going to give this to you.
Well, I think it's important to note that, there isn't necessarily going to be, a possibility of saying a statement of like it cures or heals, because it's not, kind of in a drug classification. That being said, a lot of the studies are showing that it helps, maintain and restore the kind of better barrier integrity. And so we would expect that it should improve the symptoms there. And we've certainly seen reports of that from customers of ours. So, we would certainly love to hear, if you decide to go on it, kind of your experience there, and what specifically were the symptoms that you were experiencing. Because the other issue that kind of leaky gut, I think, is a overarching broad term, and people may experience different aspects of it. So it'll be interesting to see which of those is most responsive to supplementation with Acromancy.
Very good. Is there any benefit to take more than one Akkermansia a day? Ooh, we get this one a lot. John, I'll let you take this one.
Well, I mean, I would say that there can be, and this is something that I think, Kristen pointed out, is that there can be, these moments where you're maybe trying to restore, so you're trying to kind of reset after something or something like that. Generally we anticipate these are generally recognized as safe, so it can be treated as a food. We don't recommend like having excessive amounts of dosages because we haven't tested it, much further than that. But you can imagine that there can be a ramp up. Some people do, kind of the flip side where they do, to Chris's point, like one every other day. So depending on everybody's personal situation, you can modulate it a bit up and down. So, and depending on the particular symptoms, you may experience, a faster improvement, for example, in one scenario versus another.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. So my A1C number is on the high end of normal. Is this a supplement that can help? So I would personally recommend our Pendulum glucose control product for A1Cs, just because we do have clinical trials that have proven to decrease that A1C by 0.6%. That doesn't sound like much, but on the spectrum of A1C, that is a really good amount. So I definitely would recommend the Pendulum glucose control, and you can use that code Acromancia 15% off for the Pendulum glucose control product as well. So yeah, definitely give that a try. And I will say with our products, we do offer dietitian support. We don't want to just give you some products. We want to truly help you. And so we do have, support along the way. Can't have a healthy microbiome without having healthy eating patterns. So you do get to sign up for a free one-on-one coaching call with a registered dietitian. And we also have group classes. So lots of fun support depending on what you're looking for. Okay, I thought high-fat diet is beneficial for blood sugar management. I don't fully understand the blood sugar results in the preclinical. I would expect a spike would be lower in the high-fat diet group.
I wish that high-fat diet was good for your blood sugar. Then I think I'd be definitely on a good path for some of the meals that I've chosen. Generally, all of the studies show, both in preclinical and clinical, that if you're on a high-fat diet, especially over an extended period of time, what happens is that your body becomes less and less able to handle sugar loads, and so it becomes less and less efficient. It kind of is a kind of overwhelming. You end up basically in a state where your blood sugar levels almost never go back down to baseline. They're always elevated, and so your body's constantly playing catch up, and that puts a strain on all parts of the system. And so it generally is, in fact, as you saw in those graphs between a high-fat and low-fat diet, that weight gain is much faster, and then your body's ability to move sugar out of your blood becomes less effective.
Yes, definitely. With that increased weight comes some other metabolic issues that can really impact those things. So, okay, got a good question here. I live in Canada, and your website indicated that you do not ship to Canada. We are trying, I promise. Any suggestion on how to get your product? So I recommend if you're out of the country, or we do ship to certain countries like the UK, down in South America, Australia, New Zealand. So those are all, places that we do ship to. But if you're in Canada and having some issues, I recommend, like, if you have a friend or somebody who lives in the United States, that we could ship it to them and then they would ship it to you. That's what a lot of people have done from my experience. Just in the interim until we get it up and running to Canada. I do apologize about that. Okay, how can I get a copy of this presentation? Yes, great question. So we're going to send out a recording of this 24 hours after. All right, John, I've got one for you. Does your body create Akkermansia naturally in healthy people, or do you always have to take the supplement?
Well, so once you've got Acromancia levels, your body, if it's in, kind of in a healthy state, it'll be able to sustain it. That said, I mean, part of the thing that we were looking into in our randomized controlled trial, for example, is that when we're introducing these strains, how long do they stay after being given? So we did what's called a washout period, a period where you don't have the intervention, and then in that case, it was 4 weeks later, we looked back to see in what fraction of people did the strains remain. And it was only 1 in 5, basically, that maintained it. And part of the issue there is that you would, and this is being more studied now, you would need to couple, the supplementation of the strain with other changes that kind of make that ecosystem more stable. So generally, for example, you need to start having a high fiber diet and then reducing, say, fats in your diet or other aspects of what had contributed to the ecology shifting. And so generally it takes longer, and it requires a number of different changes to potentially make for the maintenance of it going forward.
Yes, good question, good answer. Let's see here. So I have been taking Acromancia daily for 4 months. Is there a schedule for maintenance? Every other day, weekly, off a month and back on? I can't find anything on scheduling Acromancia. So good question. We recommend once daily, similar to what John was saying, with bacterial strains and probiotics, we don't know if they're colonizing or transient, meaning do they stay and colonize and we don't need them, or are they transient and we do need them? And to echo just what John mentioned in our studies, we found that, hey, you know what, these guys, they were transient. They kind of went through and we do need to supplement with them. Perhaps if you take them for longer than 3 months, like we did in the study, they could take up residence to where you wouldn't need them, but recommendation is once a day. And I would say, see what benefit you're seeing. If you feel the same, taking it every other day as if you do taking it daily, and kind of go from there. Let's see here. Is jicama a good insoluble fiber? Jicama is actually a good soluble fiber. It's got some inulin in there. So it's actually a really good soluble fiber, and that'll help feed the gut microbiome. What about the impact on your gut microbiome due to all the lectins in the oats, wheat flour, peas, barley, etc.? So there's a lot of controversy on lectins. And if you look at the literature really closely, there's actually no conclusion as to if lectins are bad for the microbiome. So as of right now, the majority of the literature does state that, the fiber in the foods that you're mentioning, the oats and wheats and flour, peas and barley, all of those things are actually more beneficial to the body. So we do recommend those. Okay, let's see here. This one, another question about if we have to take it forever. Let's see here. I already have a subscription. Can I use the promo code? So these are for the promo code is for new members only. So do apologize about that, but feel free to take advantage of the free services that are provided. Is there a correlation, John, with low Acromancia and low vitamin B12?
That's in fact a very interesting area. I believe that there is. I don't know how agreed upon it is kind of research-wise, because a lot of these observational studies, it's hard to tell if there was other confounding factors, but that is an area that is potentially tying in. That's where kind of that cross-feeding study was showing that it looked like, for example, halai was producing a pseudo version of B12, and that was necessary for Acromancia. So it seems in that context there is the need there. Now, it's not clear whether it specifically needs kind of the version that's driven by these butyrate producers versus like, okay, if you just were to take supplementation of B12, would that increase Acromancia? So that I think is still not directly understood.
Great, thank you. All right, John, got another one for you. Can you have too much Acromancia?
That's a great question. I think we don't really know yet on that side. Is there an upper side to it? I think an aspect of it is that it is kind of ecologically controlled with respect to the mucin layer and then the other strains. I think we wouldn't probably recommend that if you're already kind of on the high end that you should then really push to increasing it much further there. I think the recommendation would be kind of maybe more on the diet side and making sure that you've got the right fibers, and then potentially then supplementing in the butyrate producer. So maybe a combo thing with like a PGC, but although that would be mainly recommended for if you have metabolic syndrome, could be a way to go if that was your issue. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend necessarily pushing it much further. But that said, there isn't a direct, here's a limit. Like if you go above this, there's a negative effect. There isn't that research yet.
Wonderful. Okay. Let's see here. How do you know which is better for you, the glucose control or the Akkermansia? So I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but if your goal is really to help manage your blood glucose levels, if you have a history of diabetes in your family, that pendulum glucose control would be the better option for you. Acromansia is in pendulum glucose control. It has 5 strains, including Acromansia. And there's that synergism, like John mentioned earlier, between the strains. If, gut health and things like that are your goal, then Acromansia is going to be the better one for you. If you're not focusing on, glucose or anything like that, and if you're not focused on like wanting to get a good variety of strains. Okay. Hi, John. I have no Acromancy in my gut at all when comprehensive stool analysis has been done. I have microcolitis, and for some reason the Acromansia makes my face break out and really outrageous rosacea. I have even tried breaking open capsules of the glucose control, and I still get terrible rosacea. Any help is appreciated. I haven't heard this.
Yeah, I haven't heard
the
that
opposite.
either. In fact, generally it's the other way around, right? That people that have had various skin breakouts have actually seen resolution. Now, if it sounded like towards the end of that you were using, glucose control. So if that's the case, potentially you can try just Acromancia, because it may be one of the other strains in there that could be the culprit. But yeah, I mean, we generally tend not to see skin outbreaks from that's generally not one of the kind of complaints of it. It's, as I said, like some GI discomfort tends to be the complaint.
Yes, it's there's a lot of research on skin conditions and Acromansia actually helping it, like eczema we see a lot of and things like that. So that's really interesting. What is the shelf life of a bottle of Acromansia? I was away for 4 months and didn't bring it. The shelf life is actually a year, so should be in ship shape.
Mm-hmm.
What causes the killing off this bacteria? Is it sad diet, sugar? Ooh, I love this question. There are so many things that can impact your microbiome. So the way you're born, your foods growing up here in America and in a lot of westernized countries, we have a terrible eating habits of high sugar, high fat, and that really doesn't feed the microbiome. There's a lack of fiber. So environmental things, just where you're living also plays a role. Medications you're on, all sorts of things can really impact and shape your microbiome. Let's see here. Okay, John, are there any studies that show the benefit of taking Pendulum Akkermansia on autoimmune patients before and after?
No, so we have not done those studies. As I was, I think, saying earlier, this is a whole new sort of area of interest now that we've sort of solved the capability aspect of being able to grow this strict anaerobe in these kind of commercial scales. So we are looking to a number of collaborations, both with researchers and institutions to go into a number of these studies. So there are a variety of studies running right now, although not specifically, I think, in autoimmune at this moment.
Great, great. Okay. Does Acromancia directly affect the growth of goblet cells? If someone has little mucus, say, in someone with IBD, irritable bowel disease, mucus is usually the first thing to decrease. What do you say, John?
Yeah, so this is actually the thing that's interesting, because I think most people, when they think, well, okay, so Acromancia uses the mucin as a substrate, so oh my goodness, this is probably will lead to the decline. But actually, that's one of the signals for the goblet cells to make more. So in the end, it's actually, you can think of it more of it sort of helping to maintain and kind of flourish the kind of mucin layer and having it. So in general, a number of studies have shown that it actually thickens the mucin layer. So Akkermansia levels, increased levels of Akkermansia tend to be correlated with thicker mucin lining.
Great. If glucose levels are not pre-diabetic level, but somewhat high, about how long does it take before I start seeing a lowering if I am eating a low carb and glycemic diet? So again, everyone's microbiome is going to be different. I've had folks see, improvements right away if they're wearing a continuous glucose monitor. I had one gal, she had pre-diabetes and she was wearing a CGM, and she actually saw results within like a week, and she was so excited. But again, everyone's microbiome is different. So I can't give you an exact, oh yeah, day 6, you're going to see results, just because everyone is going to be different.
I mean, one of the things maybe that I would add there is that, we had done some pilot studies with CGMs, and if in the end, if your kind of sort of time in range is, pretty good, it's going to be hard. It's going to take longer, I think, in general. If you were to guess, it's going to take longer to potentially see an effect versus if your time in range is not that great. And if, for example, you really have very high sugar spikes, so maybe even your A1C is not, all the way in the diabetic range, but some people can be in the almost normal, but still have very high sugar spikes for some things. There, you might have a chance of seeing it earlier. That tends to be the correlation that we see. Again, to Kristen's point, it's individualized, so it's not, a guarantee, but that tends to be the breakdown.
Great. Oh, really good question here from James. Would an LFD, low-fat diet, and P9 improve the chances of weight loss?
Yeah, so certainly the combo really, really helps for a number of reasons. One, each of them on their own is helpful. So, when they've done preclinical and clinical studies, like if you change your diet habit, then that's going to have an effect. And then on top of it, there's now this mechanism and support being provided by Acromancia, and it will actually very likely be synergistic. So the effect of the combo will likely be greater than just any one of the individuals sort of just adding it up, because one will kind of help the other, and that ties in to some of the other questions about, well, how do I maintain it? How do I make it, thrive more? And why doesn't it stick around longer? And it really is in that combination. So you should think of it, the microbiome, I think the best analogy for it is an ecosystem. So, if it's sort of, if you think of it, like if you're unfortunately in the state of like, it's a desert, and then you're trying to grow this, lovely flowering plant there, well, you're going to have to like keep bringing it back, giving it water, etc. If you now start, creating a community around it where now it's no longer a desert, then it will start being able to maybe stay on its own. But it's hard. It's hard to do.
All right, great. Love that one. Will the Acromancia be able to thrive since their main source of food is mucus?
Right. Yes, but this is the part that we're learning a little bit more detail. They also need some of the the metabolites and things that are being provided by this other class of bacteria, these butyrate producers, and those really like fiber. So hence why there's all of that is kind of tied together. And so again, if you were to just constantly supplement with Acromancy, that can help. That can be the thing that turns the tide. But then if you want it to extend and stay on longer, you also should supplement. If you want to amplify that effect, you should supplement with fiber.
Yes, great. Can you clarify the stomach pH comment? You mentioned eating would help lower the pH, which means more acidic pH. Does a lower pH help the Acromancia, or are we trying to take at a time of lower acid, meaning higher pH? So basically, I think, John, what we were meaning is that we want it, basically your stomach is really acidic and it's really tough for capsules to get through the stomach acidity all the way down into the large intestine, unless they have we have a special capsule to kind of get through that. So that way it gets to where it needs to be. However, when you eat food, that helps to actually increase the pH to make it less acidic.
I apologize if I misspoke. I thought I said that it increases the pH, but the main point is that you want to reduce the acidity. You want to be able to, as Kristen's pointing out, get it through the stomach acid.
That's always so
when
confusing.
you eat a meal, it helps. Yeah.
That's confusing. Very good question. Let's see here. We've got a lot of really good questions and only 5 more minutes. Well, that one was answered, the leaky gut. Should you taper the dose in the beginning to avoid sudden changes? It's a good question. Go ahead, John, you're going to say something.
I mean, I think especially if you maybe already know that, changes, say in diet or when you take something new, you generally tend to feel it, you're more sensitive to it. That can make a lot of sense. I mean, we go down that path, as a recommendation when people start at the recommended dose and then feel, a reaction, so that they can taper off from there and see at what point it's comfortable enough to continue. And then in general, what happens is that your body kind of re-equilibrates. So now you get to a new equilibrium. And generally it's much better than your earlier one once you get past that phase.
Wonderful. Got a really good question here from Heidi. What types of foods are ideal to eat when we take one of the Pendulum products? For example, would taking Acromancia desire a different meal like heavy meat and protein, and glucose control desire more carb heavy and beans? Really good question. Everyone's individualized. So I do recommend, if you are a member, to take advantage of that one-on-one call with a dietitian. We also, for Acromancia, it's shown that polyphenols can help with the abundance. And we actually have a 4-week meal plan on, if you go into my account or on our website, for purchase that's really a polyphenol boost. So polyphenols can help with increasing the abundance of that Acromancia, and then also just making sure that you're getting a good gut healthy eating plan. I call it eating plan, not a diet. Diet is like restrictive and I'm hungry all the time. So fiberful, making sure that you're getting fiber to help nurture your gut microbiome. Remember, we talked about that density, diversity, and the polyphenols. So hopefully that helps. Have any experiments been done in humans showing reduction of the blood glucose spike after eating?
Oh, you mean with Acromancia supplementation? There has been a study on that. So and it was kind of showing, it was mainly showing actually kind of improvement in insulin sensitivity. So there's been some work on that. And then there's been, as I pointed out, a number of preclinical studies showing Acromancia alone. And then, as obviously we have our randomized controlled trial, but that wasn't Acromancia by itself. Although it's important to note that we had 2 intervention arms and a placebo arm, and the intervention arm that had the significant effect was with the addition of 2 additional strains, which included Acromancia. So there was the 5-strain combo, which is the one that included Acromancia, was the one that had the effect, versus the 3 strains, which was mainly, it's a couple of the butyrate producers and the bifido. So it seems that Acromancia, the addition of it, is the thing that sort of synergistically, gets you across the line.
Perfect. Does everyone have Akkermansia in their gut? If not, where do people get it outside of your probiotic? Oh, excellent question. So no, not everyone does have Akkermansia. I'm example right here. I had 0. So, and I eat really healthy. I'm a dietitian. So, if not, where do people get it outside of your product? So this isn't a strain you can get in foods. This is literally the only place that is known for you to get it. So, right here, Acromancia, pendulumlife.com. All right, we have time for one more question. What is the difference between Acromancia and GI repair?
So GI repair